What if a nation's air defenses suddenly began running on empty as the skies filled with incoming strikes? Across Ukraine, officials now admit missile shortages are leaving dangerous gaps, just as Russia intensifies concentrated attacks on major cities. Waves of drones and long-range weapons are overwhelming systems designed to protect civilians and critical infrastructure, pushing the conflict into a far more volatile phase. This is no longer just pressure. It's a strategic turning point unfolding in real time. Subscribe now for fast, reliable breaking updates. What happens when a nation's shield in the sky begins to run out, just as the attacks intensify? Ukrainian Air Force officials now confirm that critical air defense systems have faced moments of near-empty launchers, creating dangerous windows of vulnerability across the country. In some batteries designed to hold 6 interceptor missiles, only 2 remained operational, forcing commanders to make split-second decisions about which incoming threats to stop and which to let pass. The strain has grown steadily since winter, as Russia increased strikes on military hubs and energy infrastructure, aiming to stretch Ukraine's defenses beyond their limits. While systems such as Patriot, NASAMS, and fighter intercepts have helped block large portions of incoming fire, officials admit resources are no longer sufficient to counter every wave. Even when around 80% of targets are intercepted, the remaining 20% still cause serious damage, enough to disrupt power grids, logistics routes, and urban stability. This shortage isn't a technical failure, it's a supply crisis unfolding in real time, and it is rapidly becoming one of the most critical pressure points in the conflict's next phase. What if the battlefield suddenly stopped being everywhere and instead became one overwhelming strike zone at a time? Ukrainian defense officials now confirm that Russia has shifted from scattered attacks to high-intensity, concentrated barrages focused on single cities and regions, a tactic designed to overload air defenses within minutes. Instead of spreading missiles and drones across the country, waves are now aimed simultaneously at hubs like Kyiv, Odessa, and Dnipro, leaving little time to reload interceptors or reposition systems. Since the start of winter, strikes on military sites and energy infrastructure have surged, often arriving in tightly coordinated sequences. In several confirmed waves, more than 100 attack drones were launched in a single night, with some operations reportedly approaching 400 to 500 UAVs combined with missiles. The goal is not just destruction, it is saturation. By forcing defenders to respond to dozens of threats at once from multiple directions, Russia is exploiting a simple reality. Even advanced air defense systems have limits. When reload times stretch and missile supplies thin, gaps inevitably appear. This tactical shift has rapidly intensified pressure on Ukraine, while giving Russia a growing operational advantage in the air. What if the greatest threat in the sky was no longer missiles, but swarms of evolving drones that never seem to stop coming? Ukrainian officials now confirm that Russia has rapidly transformed its UAV campaign into a high-volume, high-tech pressure weapon. Instead of isolated strikes, waves now arrive in hundreds at a time, with some coordinated attacks reaching 400 to more than 500 drones in a single operation, overwhelming detection and interception systems. These are no longer simple one-way UAVs. Many Shahed-type drones have been upgraded with real-time navigation, onboard cameras, SIM-based communication modules, and improved resistance to electronic jamming. Some fly low along rivers and terrain to avoid radar, while others climb beyond the effective range of mobile defense teams. Russia has even begun using low-cost carrier drones, some valued around $500 each, to transport FPV attack units deep into Ukrainian airspace. The result is constant pressure across major urban and frontline regions of Ukraine, forcing defenders to stretch already limited resources. For Russia, this drone saturation strategy has become one of the most cost-effective and disruptive tools of the war, and it's accelerating fast. What if stopping most of the incoming threats still wasn't enough to prevent serious damage? Ukrainian defense officials now warn that even during their most successful interception waves, where around 80% of missiles and drones are shot down, the remaining 20% continue to strike critical targets, creating outsized consequences on the ground. That fraction alone has been sufficient to disrupt power systems, damage military facilities, and place major urban centers under constant strain. Modern air defense is built to minimize losses, not guarantee total protection. But Russia's new saturation tactics are exposing that reality with brutal clarity. When hundreds of aerial threats arrive in compressed timeframes, systems must prioritize the most dangerous targets first, often leaving others to pass through. Reload times, radar direction limits, and finite interceptor supplies all compound the challenge. Officials emphasize this is not a failure of technology, but a math problem of volume versus capacity. Each large-scale assault forces hard choices about what can be defended in the moment. Across Ukraine, even partial breaches are producing visible impact. For Russia, the strategy is clear: overwhelm rather than outmatch, and let sheer numbers do the rest. The result is a battlefield where near success still carries a heavy price. What if, even as the skies over Ukraine grow more crowded with drones and missiles, a quiet diplomatic reset is unfolding behind the scenes? Russian officials now confirm that Moscow has delivered formal proposals to Washington aimed at restoring broader bilateral ties, a move that comes alongside intensified military pressure on the battlefield. The Kremlin has publicly welcomed early peace efforts by Donald Trump, signaling openness to negotiations built on what it calls mutual respect and equality. Beyond security talks, Russia has floated cooperation in strategic sectors including energy, rare minerals, Arctic development, artificial intelligence, and even the return of direct commercial flights. Diplomats describe these steps as part of a longer-term effort to reintegrate economic channels that collapsed after the conflict began. Some U.S. envoys reportedly view Russia as a resource-rich market with significant investment potential if relations stabilize. The timing is striking. As pressure mounts across Ukraine, Moscow appears to be pairing military leverage with diplomatic outreach, tightening the battlefield while reopening negotiation doors. For Russia, the message is strategic: strength on the ground, flexibility at the table. It's a two-track approach that could shape the next phase of the conflict. What if the battlefield isn't the only front cracking under pressure, but Europe's political unity as well? As the war grinds on, sharp divisions are now emerging across the continent over how to deal with Moscow. France and Italy have openly pushed for renewed high-level dialogue, with Emmanuel Macron urging that frozen communication channels with the Kremlin be reopened as soon as possible. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni echoed the call, warning that negotiations without direct Russian participation would have limited impact. Germany, however, has taken a far tougher line. Berlin continues to argue that sanctions and sustained pressure remain the only effective tools, citing ongoing strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure and the lack of concrete concessions from Moscow. Officials insist that any peace framework must include clear shifts in Russia's position, something they say has not yet appeared. Meanwhile, planned three-party discussions involving Russia, the U.S., and Ukraine have been delayed once again, with territorial disputes identified as the central obstacle. Analysts confirm that talks have so far focused only on prisoner exchanges and localized ceasefires, not a full end to the conflict. The result is a widening strategic split inside Europe, just as military pressure intensifies, making the road to a comprehensive peace settlement more uncertain than ever. What if the future of this conflict now hinges on two leaders facing narrowing options on opposite sides of the battlefield? As air defenses strain and diplomatic channels stall, the pressure is intensifying around Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian officials continue warning that interceptor supplies are not keeping pace with the scale of incoming threats, while cities endure near-constant aerial pressure. Each large wave forces commanders to make real-time decisions over which targets can be defended and which cannot. At the same time, Moscow shows no sign of easing operational tempo, combining drone saturation, missile strikes, and concentrated regional assaults designed to stretch Ukraine's capabilities further each week. Analysts note that Russia's evolving tactics are built around volume and persistence rather than single decisive blows, steadily wearing down defensive resources. Politically, both leaders now operate under growing constraints. Kyiv must secure sustained military support while managing infrastructure resilience. Moscow weighs battlefield leverage against the risks of prolonged confrontation and stalled negotiations. With territorial issues blocking major peace breakthroughs, momentum continues to favor escalation over resolution. The coming months may not bring a dramatic turning point, but they are increasingly shaping a slow, grinding phase where endurance, supply lines, and strategic patience will determine what comes next. What if the war in Ukraine is now being shaped less by frontline movements and more by a rapidly evolving technological race in the skies? Ukrainian Air Force officials confirm that Russia's UAV campaign has entered a new phase, where drones are no longer simple one-way weapons, but networked platforms equipped with real-time navigation, onboard cameras, SIM-based communication systems, and relay drones that extend operational range. In several recent attack cycles, swarms have exceeded 100 UAVs per wave, with some combined operations reaching 400 to over 500 aerial targets alongside missiles. These drones now fly at mixed altitudes, some hugging terrain to avoid radar, others climbing beyond the effective reach of mobile defense teams. Ukraine has responded by deploying fighter jets, helicopters, mobile fire units, electronic warfare tools, and interceptor drones. Yet officials admit the pace of Russian upgrades is narrowing reaction windows each month. Military analysts describe this as a shift into sustained aerial pressure warfare, where cost-effective drones exhaust high-value defense systems. Even relatively cheap UAVs, some estimated near $500 per unit, are forcing the use of far more expensive interceptors. The conflict has become a contest of adaptation and supply speed. And right now, the tempo of technological escalation is accelerating faster than defensive stockpiles can recover. As air defenses strain, drone waves intensify, and diplomacy remains frozen, Ukraine now faces a conflict defined by endurance rather than quick victories. Russia's evolving tactics are reshaping both the battlefield and the political landscape, while Europe and Washington struggle to find a unified path forward. Is this the moment the balance begins to tilt, or the start of an even longer war of attrition? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more breaking updates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.